Have you ever caught yourself thinking, it's not worth the fight? I'll just let it go. I'm more evolved than this? Maybe you've told yourself you're choosing peace, that you're the bigger person. That silence is wisdom. But I'll tell you something few dare to admit. Every time you silence yourself when something needs to be said, you betray yourself. We live in a culture that celebrates a false kind of peace, a performance of harmony built on the quiet death of integrity. From childhood, we are taught that confrontation is bad, that politeness means obedience, that good people don't raise their voice. We learn to smile when we're burning inside, to nod when we want to scream, to endure when every cell of our being demands revolt. And this is not virtue. Nietzsche saw this with terrifying clarity. He called it what it is: slave morality. Slave morality is a system born not from love, but from fear, from weakness, from resentment. It is the morality of those who could not fight back, and so they convinced themselves and everyone else that submission was moral superiority, that meekness was noble, that biting your tongue was strength. But it's not. It's fear, wearing the mask of virtue. You tell yourself you're being good, that you're maintaining harmony. But what you're really doing is allowing yourself to be dominated. How many small humiliations have you swallowed just to keep things calm? How many times have you gone silent when you knew the truth needed to be spoken? How often do you replay the words you should have said, hours or days later in private rage? You think silence makes you wise, but it makes you complicit. And I'm not telling you to become violent or reactive. That's not power either. That's just another form of weakness dressed as strength. What I'm saying is this: you have the right to exist with a spine. You have the right to respond. You have the right to say no. And if you don't, you will rot from the inside out. Nietzsche understood that repressed strength becomes poison. Every time you deny your voice, your will, your truth, you give birth to resentment, and resentment is the cancer of the soul. You can dress it up in spiritual clothing, in philosophical justification, in moral posturing, but the wound remains. The bitterness builds, and one day it either explodes or it kills something essential inside you. We were not born to be agreeable corpses. But here's the tragedy. This morality, this passive, obedient, self-sacrificing code, it's not natural. It's learned. You were conditioned to believe that being good means being harmless, that expressing yourself is dangerous, that conflict is wrong. And the result? A society full of people who confuse silence for wisdom and fear for maturity. And yet the real path to maturity, to sovereignty, begins when you stop avoiding discomfort and start embracing confrontation as necessary for your growth. Because here's the truth: not all conflict is destructive. Some conflict is sacred. Some conflict is the fire that forges you. If you never fight, you never draw a boundary. If you never speak, you never define your truth. If you never say no, your yes means nothing. You cannot become who you truly are if you're constantly shrinking yourself to be liked, accepted, or peaceful. That isn't growth. That's spiritual suicide. Nietzsche wasn't interested in passive goodness. He wanted greatness, authenticity, power, not over others, but over yourself. The kind of power that comes from knowing what you stand for and refusing to collapse just to keep the water still. In this video, we will go deeper. We will look at the mechanics of fear, resentment, and suppression, and how they shape your life. But more importantly, we'll explore how to break this cycle, how to reclaim your will, how to move from the slave morality to the spirit of the lion, the one who dares to say no. But first, let's look closer at the poison we carry in silence: resentment, the hidden fuel of the weak, the slow death of the self. Now that you've seen how slave morality teaches us to fear confrontation, it's time to examine the darker consequence of this submission: resentment. Nietzsche didn't just observe this poison. He dissected it, exposed it, named it for what it truly is: a hidden cry of impotence. Resentment is not a passive feeling. It's an active force. A force turned inward. A fire that should have burned outward, in action, in speech, in rebellion, but instead festers quietly inside you. You feel it when you ruminate on what you should have said, when you can't sleep because someone crossed your boundaries and you let them, when you smile in the moment and curse in the dark. Nietzsche described it perfectly in On the Genealogy of Morals. Resentment is born when the will to power, the vital impulse to affirm your existence, is blocked. When you want to act but are too afraid. When you long to speak but bite your tongue. When you feel rage but coat it in politeness. And instead of confronting, you justify. You tell yourself you're noble, that you're moral for not reacting, that you're above the pettiness of response. But what you're really doing is rewriting cowardice as compassion. And inside, you know it. Because resentment doesn't lie dormant. It leaks. It leaks through passive aggression, through sarcasm, through withdrawal, through that quiet bitterness that turns your soul sour. You smile, but your eyes are tired. You forgive, but never forget. You agree, but deep down, you hate yourself for it. Let me ask you something honestly. How many times have you forgiven someone just because you were too afraid to tell them the truth? How often do you let others step on you and then call it peace? How many people do you keep in your life just to avoid the discomfort of cutting ties? That's not virtue. That's fear management dressed in spiritual robes. And here lies Nietzsche's brutal warning. The resentful are not innocent. They are accomplices to their own oppression. They do not fight back, not because they are wise, but because they are terrified. And over time, that suppressed will become twisted. It seeks not truth, but revenge. It longs to see others fall, not because they deserve it, but because it validates your silence, your submission. Resentment turns victims into judges. It masks envy as morality. It poisons perception until power looks like evil and submission looks like sainthood. And worst of all, you begin to identify with your chains. You tell yourself that enduring pain makes you special, that being silent makes you strong, that suffering in secret is a badge of honor. But Nietzsche tears through this illusion with one idea. Resentment is self-betrayal spiritualized. You cannot be free while you still cling to bitterness. You cannot grow while you keep swallowing your voice. You cannot love yourself while you keep abandoning yourself to avoid discomfort. Resentment is not just emotional rot. It is the slow erosion of your soul's integrity. But here's the good news. Nietzsche doesn't leave us there. He knew this isn't the end. It's the signal, the sign that something within you still wants to live, that the will to power hasn't died. It's just waiting for you to remember who you are. And that's where we go next. In the next chapter, we'll explore Nietzsche's revolutionary idea of the will to power, a force not of domination, but of transcendence, the ability to reclaim yourself without shame, to act, to confront, to exist fully without apology. If you've been quietly rotting in resentment, if you're done pretending that silence is strength, then what comes next may change everything. So far, we've exposed the architecture of fear and the corrosion of resentment. But Nietzsche was never content to simply diagnose the sickness of the soul. He offered a way out, a radical, electric idea that could set fire to your numb existence and awaken something ancient inside you. It's called the will to power. Now listen carefully. The will to power is not the craving to dominate others. That's the shallow interpretation of people who never dared to look deeper. What Nietzsche meant was this: every living thing at its core wants to expand, to become, to surpass itself. It's not about control. It's about vital energy, the impulse of life that refuses to shrink. The same force that drives a seed to crack open concrete. The same hunger that makes a lion roar into the wind. The same fire that once burned in you before you were told to behave. But the slave morality? It taught you to fear that force. Don't stand out. Don't speak up. Don't want too much. Don't be too much. It told you to shrink to fit, to mold yourself into something small, polite, acceptable. It taught you that passivity is virtue, that desire is dangerous, that power, your power, is a threat. So what did you do? You buried it. You swallowed your instincts. You cut yourself off from the fire. You chose the comfort of safety over the risk of being seen. And slowly you disappeared. But here's the truth Nietzsche screams from the grave. You were not born to obey. You were not born to kneel. You were born to become, to expand, to burn with the intensity of someone who dares to exist without apology. The will to power is your right to take up space, not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, existentially. It's your right to say no, to assert your boundaries, to choose your path, to own your experience. And if you're wondering how to reclaim this right, it doesn't happen all at once. It starts small. It starts with refusing to smile when you're hurting. It starts with saying no without explanation. It starts with walking away from what insults your soul. It starts with choosing presence over performance. Every act of self-assertion, no matter how small, is a crack in the walls that have kept you caged. And here's the paradox Nietzsche gives us. The more you reclaim your power, the less you need to prove it. You stop performing strength and begin embodying it. You stop being reactive and become centered. You stop needing permission to be yourself and start becoming yourself. This is not aggression. It is not egoism. It is authentic existence. The will to power is not about stepping on others. It's about refusing to be stepped on. It's about becoming so fully yourself that no system, no person, no voice can define you anymore. But Nietzsche knew this path is not easy. It's not comfortable. It requires death, not physical, but spiritual. The death of who you thought you were. The burning down of the false self, the one built on obedience, fear, and approval. And for this rebirth, he gave us one of the most profound metaphors in philosophy. The three metamorphoses of the spirit, the camel, the lion, and the child. In the next chapter, we'll dive into that symbolic journey. You'll see how shedding the burdens of submission leads to rebellion, and ultimately to creation. You'll discover how to stop being the camel, become the lion, and finally, be reborn as the child who creates a new world. Nietzsche didn't just talk about power, he mapped out a spiritual evolution, a sequence of transformations every soul must undergo if it wishes to be free, calling it the three metamorphoses of the spirit, the camel, the lion, and the child. This is not a metaphor. It's a mirror. The camel is where most people begin and remain, obediently carrying the weight of traditions, expectations, social roles, and moral duties, finding virtue in self-sacrifice and believing its suffering is noble. But this strength is sterile. It only survives. However, one day, the camel collapses, not from weakness, but from awakening, realizing this submission is slavery. And in that collapse, the lion roars to life. The lion is the spirit that says no to blind obedience, inherited guilt, fake morality, and the thou shalt dragon of societal commandments, like thou shalt be modest, or thou shalt be selfless. The lion faces this dragon with clarity, saying, I will, not fighting to destroy, but to reclaim space and exist on its own terms. Yet, even the lion is not enough, as it remains reactive, defining itself in opposition. There is a final transformation. After the camel collapses and the lion roars, comes the child. The child is the spirit reborn, not burdened like the camel, nor fighting like the lion, but free. The child doesn't carry expectations, doesn't perform, but creates, saying yes from sovereignty, playing, imagining, and inventing new values, building a new world instead of reacting to the old one. This is the essence of individuation, to go from endurance through resistance into creation. The camel is what society makes you. The lion is what you must become to break free. But the child is who you truly are before the world told you who to be. This is what Nietzsche meant by becoming who you are not, finding a label or conforming to an ideal, but creating yourself from the ashes of everything you were told to be. This path is brutal. You will lose people and approval and walk alone for a time, but in return, you will gain something sacred, your soul. In the next chapter, we all dive into how your silence in the face of conflict is not a virtue, but a betrayal of the self, and you'll learn how to stop hiding behind politeness and start living with unapologetic truth. Let's finish this. You've come too far to turn back now. Now that you've come this far past the burden of the camel, through the defiance of the lion, and toward the creative innocence of the child, there is one final demon to face, your own silence. The uncomfortable truth is, your silence has a price, and that price is your identity. How many times have you told yourself, it's not worth it, I'll let it go, or I'd rather avoid the fight? Deep down, a fire burns, not from aggression or weakness, but because you've abandoned yourself in the name of peace. Every time you swallow a truth, let a boundary be crossed, or avoid a necessary confrontation, you're not being wise. You're being afraid. You're teaching the world how to treat you, and the world listens. Nietzsche warned that a morality based on fear will never bring peace. It will bring degeneration. When you suppress your will, you don't become good. You become invisible. Your silence, dressed up as politeness, is not neutrality, it's complicity. People see it. Those who act in bad faith sense it, testing your limits, overstepping, and harming, while you say nothing and excuse them. The cycle continues. But here is the truth. You are not born to be a passive participant in your own life. You were not born to be the camel forever. You were meant to evolve, awaken, roar, and eventually create. But for that, you must speak. Not loudly, not always, not out of rage, but from a place of unshakable clarity. To say, I exist, I matter, I will not remain silent anymore. No, it will not be easy. You will lose some things, perhaps people who only love the quiet version of you. But what you gain is worth infinitely more. Dignity, self-respect, wholeness. You gain yourself. Nietzsche didn't promise comfort or an easy life, but he promised something deeper, authentic existence. He said, one must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. That chaos you feel, that pain, unrest, suppressed fire, it's not a curse. It's the signal, the sign that you're ready to become who you are. But only if you stop pretending, stop complying, and break the silence. So write it, say it, live it. I choose to no longer remain silent. This is not the end. It's the beginning. In the next chapter of your life, you won't just survive conflict. You'll be forged by it, freed by it, defined by it.